for Scotland. Radio Saltire.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Monday Night Football Show with me, your host Scott McIntosh, live from Radio Saltire in Trinent. It's a very special show that we've got in line for you today. We're going to look back with regards to last night's Edinburgh Derby, and seeing as it's a special show, I've got a special guest returning after his debut after the Hearts Aberdeen match. Say hello, Anthony Brown.
Afternoon.
Thanks very much for that, Anthony. Now, what we're going to look to try and do today, naturally, as everyone knows that listens to the show on a regular basis, I'm a Hearts fan, and I'm not going to try and sway away from that today, so I'm not going to try and be too impartial. So I'm hoping that the Hibs fans listening can get a lot of pleasure listening to me try and dissect that performance from last night, and also I'm hoping that the Hearts fans can maybe try and find it a little bit of a cathartic sort of exercise as well for them. So Anthony, I thought we would probably start discussing last night's match by looking at the team lineups and maybe how we interpreted how the game was going to pan out once we heard those teams. What was your impression firstly about how the Hearts team would shape up?
I wasn't overly surprised at the lineup simply because I knew there was going to be something within it that was going to be a little bit obscure, just because of all the dilemmas Craig Levein had to think about in terms of the midfield. I was speculating on Twitter the other day that he might have played Novak in midfield for a bit of presence. In hindsight, I think that might have been worth trying. I wasn't overly surprised that Grelak was in the team. I thought he might have been at left back, but him being in central midfield wasn't a massive surprise either, because he has played there before in Poland, and I think he sees that as his main position. Conor Randall, again, not overly surprised he started in central midfield. Personally, I'd have put him out on the right, maybe where Don Cowie usually plays, for sort of energy and just to try and play up against Stevenson. Callaghan playing in the advanced midfield role, I wasn't convinced by that at the time, and having watched the game, I don't think it's a position for him. I think he's better playing a little bit deeper. In terms of left back, I wouldn't have played Brandon there after the St Johnstone game. Yes, he came on a game against St Johnstone, but I just always felt he looked uncomfortable. Thought if you were going to play him on the right and put Michael Smith at the left back. But possibly in Craig Levein's thoughts were Brandon Barker's better than Martin Boyle and maybe more dangerous, so he wants Michael Smith on that side to try and combat him. But I think it was pretty evident last night that Brandon wasn't really suited to that occasion, certainly playing at left back. Ewan Henderson, wasn't overly surprised he started. I wouldn't have started him personally, just because I'm not convinced the Edinburgh Derby is sort of scene for rookie teenagers. I thought he would have probably been better coming on maybe after an hour, but Craig said that Ishma can't play 3 games in a week, so I get his thinking with him dropping out of the team. Potentially Milinkovic would have been a better option with hindsight, just a bit more experience, a bit more physicality if you like. Lafferty playing up front wasn't a great surprise. The rest of the defence pretty much picked itself, and Walker playing on the right was a bit of a surprise, or the right of the 3 if you like, the more advanced midfielders. It's generally best playing off the left or the centre, but again I can see why he was put there. I think as the game panned out, it became apparent that it wasn't the right team, and Craig obviously realised that with his substitutions and his comments after the game.
I know that we say this quite a lot on the show, and obviously hindsight is an exact science, but looking at someone like Jamie Brandon, who does have attributes to bring to a game like an Edinburgh Derby, but potentially not in that area of the park. He was primarily a central midfielder during his sort of youth career with Rangers, and then initially brought in at Hearts, with the same position in mind. Do you think that it might have been wiser to have started, like you say, with Randall and Smith playing as those full-backs, seeing how the game panned out, and maybe just giving Brandon a bit of a role in midfield, just to even try and press the game and see if we could maybe just try and get our foot on the ball a bit more?
Personally, I wouldn't have played Brandon. That's nothing personal against the guy. If I was playing him, I'd have played him at right back and put Michael Smith at left back. But he's clearly a talented player. You can see when he's got the ball, he's comfortable in the ball, but he just wasn't suited to left back last night. When I've seen him at right back, when he played at Celtic Park, he was very good, very comfortable. He would have probably been able to handle it a lot better if he was on the right last night. In terms of the midfield, I would have dropped Callaghan deeper. I would almost play him as a sitting midfielder if you have to. You're either in beside Randall or Christian Novak or even Bobbin. I don't know what was wrong with Bobbin last night. He wasn't in the squad, so potentially injured. but I think that Callahan would have been better sort of offering some sort of protection at the defence. Randall, I don't know, I know he is a central midfielder, but to me he's better as a right back or even a sort of right-sided midfielder. Just don't know if he's... Hearts are basically lacking a dominant central figure. That's why I suggested Novak, just for his presence, and I don't think he's a bad footballer. He got caught up in that malaise that everybody got caught up in last season, and I think he might have been worth a risk, maybe more so than Grilak or Randall last night, as that sort of midfield stiffener, if you like.
Yeah, I felt at times watching, particularly the first half with Randall, we've highlighted that even although he maybe hasn't quite sort of laid a glove on midfielders in previous games for Hearts, and that his best performances have been as a sort of wing slash fullback, I felt that last night his positional discipline was almost too on the point. So he'd clearly been given a role and a job to do, but so often we looked so lopsided that Michael Smith was getting continuously sort of doubled up on for Stevenson and Barker, and then you seem to see the same again sort of over the other side with Whittaker and Boyle clearly making a case of sort of doubling up on Brandon. Would you say that the Hearts midfield was possibly just a bit too narrow?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the reason I would have played Randall sort of right midfield, where Cowie plays, just sort of energy and a bit of extra protection for the central midfield and for the sort of right back, if you like, because Randall will give you a bit of energy. He'll be a wee bit of a terrier in terms of stopping a left back getting up the pitch, and he is capable of going past somebody if he has to. I would have gone with Callahan, Walker and one other in central midfield, but probably not Randall or Grilak.
Going back to the point you made about Ishmael Galvez and the fact that Craig Levein felt that he wouldn't have been able to have started 3 games in a week from the start, given how much of an effort Hearts made to sign Galvez at the start of the year, not a lot of money in terms of football generally speaking, but for a club like Hearts in the situation we're in just now, it was a lot of money that was sort of spent on him. Would you say that it's quite disappointing that we either don't feel that he can physically perform over 3 games in a week, or that potentially that could have been masking that Craig Levein felt that he couldn't trust him playing on the left side like he asked Henderson to try and perform?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing with Ishmael is he was signed primarily as a striker, and he's not going to play as a striker every week now because Lafferty's there as the main striker. I know Lafferty has played wide and Ishmael's played up top. People are saying that if these two are in the team, and Lafferty should play up top and Ishmael should play wide. And he doesn't strike me as a sort of guy who's naturally inclined to work his balls off, if you like. I mean, he is working for the team. You can see he's upped his work rate this season, and Craig singled him out for praise. But I don't know, he's maybe not got the up and down sort of instinctive nature to go and help his fullback if he has to in a game like last night. Again, I don't think Henderson's necessarily, he's got the attitude, but I don't know if he's got necessarily the physicality to cover the ground and what have you that is maybe required to play that role either. I don't know, I would still have, Craig and the medical staff at Hearts will know better than me what condition Ishmael's in, but I would still have been inclined to start him last night, and just, if he's not able to play the 3 games, then just leave him out the Rangers game at the weekend, and hopefully you've got a result last night.
Okay, well, we'll go back to the Hearts team, and we'll probably discuss in more sort of length and depth, focusing on each player as the show goes on. But let's now focus a little bit on the Hibs starting lineup. It seemed almost too easy to just assume that Hibs would probably start with that system, given how they performed in the second half on Saturday against Celtic. Was that the lineup that you were pretty much expecting once the news had broken about Stokes and the fact that he was potentially going to be not fit? Once
the news had broken about Stokes, yes, but before the news about Stokes, I actually thought they might have gone with the diamond again, because that's generally a formation that's served them well in big games in the past, and it's a good way of accommodating Bartley, McGeoch and McGinn, who, although they're formidable last night, and they always are formidable when they play, they don't always play together simply because of McGeoch's injury issues over the past as long as he's been at Hibs, so they've not always been able to play in the same midfield. I actually thought they might have gone with those 3 and then maybe Slivka in there. Well, originally Swanson, but obviously he became an injury doubt, and then maybe just go with Slivka. I thought Neil Lennon might have been a little bit wary of Hearts just because of the Craig Levein factor and all that, so I thought he might have tried to be quite tight and compact himself, but he obviously recognised that Hearts could potentially be vulnerable in the full-back areas, which is why he's gone for Boyle and Barker. And he clearly rates Barker. He's clearly liked him since he first saw him at Man City, and he clearly wants to get him in and get him a run of games. And last night you saw why. You got a glimpse of what this boy's all about. I mean, he was real quality, wasn't he?
I mean, staying on with the Anthony Stokes situation then, now, as a Hearts fan, for me it seemed like a positive that he wouldn't be playing, but I think now looking back on that decision for Simon Murray to be starting the game, I almost feel like we were a little bit naive to just be basing it all on ability. And in fact, when you look at how infectious Simon Murray is as a player to probably play alongside, given that he will, he'll run his socks off for you all game, do you feel that actually probably hindered Hearts ultimately in the end? Because not that the other Hibs players wouldn't have been up for the derby, but obviously seeing your lone front man run the channels and show that much effort, that probably would have rubbed off on the rest of the team, probably more so than say playing someone like Stokes, who can sometimes look a little bit isolated up top on his own.
No, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I definitely, when I saw Stokes was out, I thought Hibs, I wasn't convinced by Simon Murray when he signed for Hibs. He obviously went on that great run at the start of the season. You're thinking fair enough, he's making you eat your words if you like. Martin Boyle, I've never been overly convinced by him. I know he was playing wide last night, so I'm thinking to myself, if Anthony Stokes is out, who are Hibs going to play up front? I was actually thinking maybe they'll go with Matulevicius. And then when Simon Murray's in the team, I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably good news for Hearts, bit of a blow for Hibs. And I'd actually, when Murray's in the team, you're thinking, if this is the Simon Murray of the last couple of months, then Hibs could be a wee bit impotent here. Obviously, if it's the Simon Murray of the first month or two at Hibs, then he's a danger. And obviously, he sort of set the tone for the match, if you like, getting the early goal. And it's an old cliche that goals change games, but had he not scored at that point, you never know. Hearts may have got themselves settled into the game, become a bit more robust, hard to beat, sit in, frustrate Hibs. It could have been a totally different game. So he's won the game by scoring the goal, and he's also sort of set the tone for an open match that sort of played into Hibs' hands, if you like, over the course of the game.
Well, that opening goal definitely did seem to bring about a consistent narrative, if you're a Hearts and Hibs fan just now, with regards to how these games have been starting at Easter Road over the last 2 or 3 seasons. There seems to be a general sort of malaise about Hearts play. They're very slow to get out the blocks. And then what Hibs tend to do very well, I might add, is they tend to sort of sometimes make a point of sitting back in the second half, sometimes soaking up a bit of pressure, knowing that they've got players such as Boyle, or in this case Barker, who are able to sort of break at pace and maybe try and nick another goal for them. Have you picked up as a journalist on that sort of trend that seems to be happening just now in these Hibs Hearts games? Would you say that is it maybe a bit too simplistic for me to just say that seems to be just the way that Hearts are coming out the blocks? Maybe they're too slow, or should we be giving maybe more praise to Hibs on how they're starting the matches?
I don't know. I mean, last night, before Hibs scored, Jamie Walker had a wee half chance from the edge of the box where he's put one over the bar, so in theory he catches that better, it goes in the net, and you say Hearts have made a fast start. But I know what you're saying. Hibs look the more sort of purposeful, and then they get the goal. Even after the goal, though, I didn't feel there was another goal coming immediately after. It didn't feel like it was relentless Hibs pressure after that. They were on top. Hearts looked a wee bit sort of flattened by the goal, but it didn't really feel like Hibs were absolutely putting them to the sword early doors. But I think the home crowd's a factor as well in terms of team getting on the front foot. It's generally, in a game like that, when the crowd are up for it, if you score early, it's going to have the effect of pushing the other team back and what have you. So I don't know if there's anything too much to read into that in terms of how Hibs are starting the game. To be honest, I actually thought Hearts started with, like, the players visibly looked like they were up for it. They were, even Greylack, he's getting slaughtered, and arguably rightly so in terms of what he delivered in the game, but you could see he was trying to win tackles. He was going in, he was aggressive, he was clearly up for it, if you like, and so were the whole Hearts. Certainly Callaghan was running about. He was ineffective, but he was running about trying to make tackles. Walker was right up for it. I mean, it's easy to say, they weren't up for it, they didn't show enough desire. That's always going to get thrown at guys when they lose a derby. But I think last night, certainly early on anyway, I thought Hearts were as up for it as the Hibs players. It just ultimately Hibs quality shone through in the end. No,
I would probably agree, and I thought that was probably the most valid point that Craig Levein made last night, was that he couldn't fault the effort. And I think as we'll probably touch on throughout today's show, it's just a case of Hearts just maybe being a bit more limited, and and especially within that central area of the park. And sometimes you've just got to hold your hands up and say that, you know, you can try as much as you can, but you kind of do have to sometimes rely on the other team maybe having a bit of an off night, especially with their impact players. And as, you know, sadly Hearts found out last night, you know, their two main players, McGeoch and McGinn, were certainly on fire. McGinn tended to sort of carry on that form that he showed going back to last Saturday against Celtic. Going back to sort of the Hearts style of play, and it's something that has been highlighted now over the last few weeks, and it can be difficult to maybe and maybe unfair and harsh to maybe try and point this towards Craig Levein, given that, you know, he has inherited that squad somewhat from Ian Cathro, and there has been a lot of away games, but they do seem to be lacking a lot of pace, tempo and width in their game. Now, would you say that that's just a knock-on effect for that Cathro legacy, and we're going to have to wait maybe another transfer window or two before we see, you know, major changes and the major sort of structural change that Craig Levein wants to carry out within the squad? Yeah,
I think so. I think it's fair to say Hearts are still a sort of work in progress, if you like. I mean, they've picked up results in the last few weeks, but they're not pulling up trees. They're basically, these results have been based on being solid defensively first and foremost, and then being resilient. They're not based on Hearts tearing teams apart. I mean, they've played well in the second half at Dundee and lost the game. They played very well for an hour at Ross County, and then for the last half hour had to defend, obviously after they lost Randall. They played reasonably well in the second half at Partick. They played well against Aberdeen. They didn't play well against St Johnstone. And what was the other game? They played well early on against Hamilton and then had to defend after that. They are capable of playing well to an extent, but in terms of these away games, they're not capable of playing teams off the park the way some other teams are at the minute. They are still very much reliant on sort of spirit and resilience and defensive organisation to win games. In terms of last night, I don't think they set out to play long ball. I know every time Christoph gets the ball there's this shout at hoof and what have you, and Christoph's not the most cultured footballer you're going to get, but he's a solid defender and he will pass the ball when there's an option on. But I think the thing you're finding just now is, certainly last night, the Hearts midfielders were getting closed down. They weren't naturally making space for the defenders to give them the ball. And I mean, even somebody like Bobbin makes himself available. That may have helped Hearts get a wee bit of rhythm. I know he's the boo boy and what have you just now. Hearts fans aren't having him. But the one thing about Prince is he always sort of makes himself available. And even if it's just to sort of move possession about. Hence why he probably is the boo boy, because he doesn't hide in a game, and I think that's something that. And he does get himself in situations. He gets himself in situations because he's willing to take the ball in a tight area, which a lot of maybe the likes of Randall and Greelak weren't as comfortable coming short to get the ball, didn't necessarily want the ball as much. But you need your midfielder to come and show for you when you're under pressure. Otherwise, the centre half's got no option but to go long. So I felt sorry for Berra and Suter last night because they were having to go long just because Hibs were pressing the Hearts players so well that they never really had any options, and as you say, they just don't have the players to play in these tight areas just now. I mean, Walker can take the ball in tight areas, but you don't want to be relying on that the whole game, him coming short to get the ball off the centre halves. Yeah, it is an option that Hearts may have to look at in the short term, because he's the only one that can sort of dictate. He could potentially become a deep lying player because you have got attacking options like Milinkovic, Henderson, Gonçalves, who could play off Lafferty and drop Walker deep to play beside Callaghan or Randall or whoever else. And then you've got somebody who can be a sort of deep lying playmaker, a bit like what Dylan McGeoch does, or even Scott Allen when he was at Hibs the first time. I mean, I think that Walker's potentially got that in his game, and Craig certainly is viewing him as an all-round midfielder now, capable of doing the like a more defensive sided role, if you like, if he had to. Not that he will play him there, but he certainly sees him as a more rounded midfielder than maybe he was a year ago or whatever. It was funny that you mentioned that sort of term, hoofball, particularly when the Hearts centre halves have the ball and they tend to be going for those sort of almost long diagonals. I actually found that Hibs incorporated that into their game fairly well last night, so they were capable of mixing it up pretty well, and when they felt that they needed to, they actually were able to play those long diagonals, particularly more so focusing on Brandon and Boyle. And I felt that was a part of the game that they played reasonably well for the first hour until Hearts made that slight change with bringing Brandon off. What did you make of the Hibs performance with regards to them mixing it up? I know that a lot will be said about, you know, the fact that they've got playmakers like McGeoch or McGinn that can carry the ball forward, but I felt that was a part of their game that was very much not touched upon in terms of the post-match analysis. Oh, you could see last night Hibs were playing these balls into Boyle and Barker, and even when Barker or Boyle were missing them and they were going out to play or whatever, Neil Lennon was giving real applause for the attempt at the pass. He was obviously wanting that. He'd obviously told them, go to diagonal, go to the fullbacks, try and get Boyle and Barker in behind. And people don't necessarily appreciate that these days because they want to see slick passing football, but it's a massive asset if you can do that. If you've got the wide players that can run onto those and get in behind vulnerable fullbacks or even non-vulnerable. I would say Michael Smith's a pretty competent fullback. Brandon Barker made him look pretty poor last night. Now I think that was a pretty good tactic by Hibs. They obviously sensed that Hearts could be vulnerable in those areas and they've played on it. But they also have the ability to play through midfield with McGeoch and McGinn, and ably aided by Bartley as well, who's he's not even an unsung hero now because they love him, but really important part of what they do.
Well, I know it's not a popular sort of perception to have how your team should play football, but I felt that even playing the long diagonals and almost playing possession football seemed to work for Hearts in the second half, just primarily by putting more bodies up in the opposition half, getting Concalves on the park, bringing Stockton on as well. It brought a little bit more sort of possession and pressure our way. It didn't really equate to anything chance-wise, apart from maybe a half chance for Cole Stockton from a set play. But what did you make of the changes that Craig Levein made at half-time, not just in terms of personnel, but also the way in which we seem to change our shape slightly?
Well, Cochrane was sort of like for like, wasn't he, when he came on for Trilak? And that was pretty much like for like. I mean, to be honest, Cochrane did really well when he came on. Absolutely sensational for a 16-year-old in the context of a 16-year-old playing in an Edinburgh derby. I'm still not convinced that a guy of that age should be going into that environment, not because he's not got the talent, but just for the physicality. I mean, you saw the tackle on McGinn, that was pretty reckless. It could have caused him some damage. And that's nothing against Harry Cochrane, it's just he's not equipped to go in and fight with men, if you like, in these sort of...
It was a sign of a boy that I think had been told he was a boy for a good 45 minutes whilst he's been on the park.
And he started, I want to make my mark.
Yeah, I think he just, that sort of lack of maturity where he just felt, I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to leave the leg in, and at the very best I'll get around the applause, which he did, unfortunately, from the Hearts fans. And that probably told you more about the frustration that the fans are feeling, that the loudest cheer of the night probably came at that point of the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see this boy's got talent. He is clearly talented, but I think it might be, I'm all for playing him in games and bringing him on here and even starting him in games, but I just think you're potentially asking too much of him, putting him in that environment. And he's not going to complain. He's getting exposure in an Edinburgh derby at 16, which will do him the world of good going forward. But I just worry that he's going to get himself injured, or he's going to injure somebody else. I mean, he got himself injured at Ross County the other week there. I fear for him whenever he goes into a tackle. He just looks like he's going to end up hurt. And I mean, Craig said afterwards, I wish I'd started Harry. I'm not convinced that would have made a dramatic difference. I mean, he is talented, he can keep the ball, but Hibs he'd have run out of steam after 55-60 minutes in that sort of environment. I'm not sure he would have been able to dictate against Bartley, McGinn, McGeoch. I mean, he did, as I say, he did really well in the context of a 16-year-old, but if he was 30 and he played like that, people would just say it was another middling midfield performance.
And I think Hibs, to be fair to Cochrane as well, it's fine making that remark that he would have started him, but I don't think he would have been able to have influenced the game the way Hibs started that match. Naturally, Hibs psychologically maybe retreated 5-10 yards in the second half, which a lot of teams do when they go a goal up in those types of matches.
The opposition have nothing
and
to
that
lose
allowed
as well.
him a bit more time on the ball than he probably would have got starting the game.
Yeah, I mean, I love him when he's got the ball. He looks like he's always looking for a pass and he looks comfortable and composed and what have you, but I don't know, I don't think he would have made a dramatic difference to how Hearts started the game. I don't think he would have stopped them falling behind. I don't think he would have suddenly made them dominate the game or whatever, or take the game to Hibs any more than they did. He's certainly a player that will come on, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about him in the years to come, and I'm sure he will go on to dominate Edinburgh derbies at times in the future, but I'm not convinced. Craig says he would have started, he regrets not starting him. I'm not convinced it would have made a great deal of difference, to be honest.
Do you think in terms of Craig Levein's game management just now, especially given the number of teenagers that he's having to play, more so out of necessity than anything else, would you say that if we'd had a few more experienced heads on that park last night, that when it looked fairly obvious to everyone after the first 15-20 minutes that it wasn't working and we were struggling to get out of our own half at times, that he potentially would have made changes a bit earlier than half time? Or do you think that there was an element of not wanting to rock the boat or damage anyone's confidence? You could see that Brandon almost, the confidence was draining from him as the first half went on.
Yep.
But it was almost as if he felt that I need to give him another 10-15 minutes just so that he doesn't feel as if, you know, he was the main factor behind the...
Well, I was really surprised Brandon came out for the second half. Again, I hate talking like that about a 19-year-old boy, because he's probably thinking I actually did alright last night in the context of a 19-year-old boy playing in the Edinburgh Derby, but it was clear to see that he wasn't suited to play in that position in that match, and for me he shouldn't have come out for the second half either, or he should have been switched over to right back just to give him a little bit of extra sort of assurance, if you like, playing on his right side. Craig's not been scared to substitute people at half time. He did it with Prince at the weekend, he did it with Rafael last night, he's done it in pretty much every game he's played. I think the thing about Craig is he's not scared to admit when he's made a mistake in terms of tactically. He'll admit that didn't work, he'll take a player off, and he won't try and dress it up. He'll just say that wasn't good enough, that didn't work. People say he's stubborn and he never admits his mistakes. That may have been the case in the past, but certainly since he's become Hearts manager, he's openly admitted things have not worked, and he's been fairly quick to rectify them and move things about. I mean, he obviously realised that Gilak wasn't. He said, what was it? He said Gilak and Randall got lost in the game, so he recognises that it didn't work. He's not deluded. He doesn't think that worked and is a strategy going forward. But the bottom line is he simply doesn't have the players available to him at the moment, and his critics will say, well, that's his fault as director of football for overseeing all this recruitment. I mean, we don't know exactly who Craig signed and who Craig didn't. He may have been responsible for every one of these players coming in, he may have been responsible for only a few of them coming in, but at the end of the day, I think we've just got to judge him on Craig Levein, the manager, from the start of September onwards. What's happened as director of football has happened. He's now in his post as manager. We have to accept that period of director of football, good things happened, bad things happened, but now he's the manager. He should be judged on that, in my view, going forward. He has to sort out the mess that he inherited from the previous head coach, and I would back him to do it over time, but right now it's just a case of muddling through until you get Doom and Cowie back, and then until you get back to Tynecastle, and then until you can get a couple of bodies in January. And also until you can get something sorted with left back, whether that's Ashley Smith-Brown or signing somebody new or promoting somebody from the academy.
Is there any rumours with regards to Ashley Smith-Brown? Is it just as clear cut that he's going back down just to get some medical treatment and just sort of recuperate?
He was at the game last night.
So he was at the game last night.
He was sitting next to Arno Doom, just next to the press seats. I mean, I don't know, he seems to be picking up injuries every other week, or fresh injuries or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I know at Breda last season he played about 20 odd games and did have a few injury issues, but he still managed 20 odd games, which is not bad in terms of your first full season of playing. I mean, whether it's just bad luck or if he is a bit of a, I don't know. I never like to call players injury prone, because if you pick up an injury, I don't think you can help it. But some people would have you believe that certain people get injured more easily, if you like. I don't know. I mean, somebody would say Dylan McGeoch, for instance, is injury prone, but I just think he's getting injured. He can't control that. It's not because he's weak, pea-hearted or anything like that. I mean, I can't speak into it. I've never met Ashley Smith-Brown. I don't know what he's like as a person, but I don't see any reason for him to be saying I'm injured when he's trying to make his way in the game, trying to make a career for himself. So he must be genuinely injured. You can't help it if you're pulling your hamstrings or whatever else. It just, unless you're continually phoning in with different excuses, and I don't know. It just seems like an unfortunate situation.
Well, that seems to be a good point probably in the show, maybe just to call half time just now. We're just going to play a couple of ads, then we'll come back and probably focus more on the Hibs side of the game last night, and we'll be able to maybe touch on a little bit what both teams need to do for the remainder of the season. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for the rest of the show.
Do you fancy yourself as a bit of a know-it-all when it comes to Hibernian FC? Well, now is the chance to put your Hibs trivia skills to the test. On Sunday, November the 5th, the Famous Five Suite at the Hibs Social Club will host a charity quiz and raffle night in aid of Dnipro Kids and community radio station Radio Saltire. Fans are encouraged to team up with friends and family to come along and join the fun. There will be appearances from some familiar faces from Hibs past, and guests will have the chance to ask some questions as part of a special Q&A section in the evening. Doors will open at 7 p.m. A buffet will be available, with a cash bar in operation also. An engraved trophy will also await the winning team, and there will be other opportunities to win on the evening by purchasing some raffle tickets at the event. Prizes and guests will be confirmed over the coming few days, so keep your eyes peeled for further information. Purchase your ticket now for £5 per person or £25 for a team of 5, with payment taken at the event. Book your place today by emailing scott_macintosh1983 at hotmail.co.uk. That is scott_mcintosh1983 at hotmail.com.
Music for Scotland. Radio Saltire. Radio Saltire.
And welcome back to the Monday Night Football Show here on Radio Saltire. Just want to take this opportunity just to remind our listeners to listen out and stay tuned for Steve Miller. He'll be on at 6 p.m. this evening. Now, going back onto the Edinburgh Derby last night, Anthony, I thought we would now focus a little bit more on Hibs and what Hibs are doing so well now over the piece in the Derby games. It's a bit unfortunate that we seem to have this hoodoo with this show, whereas Hearts have never won a derby since we started recording these shows around 3 years ago. So I'm hoping it's got nothing to do with us, but I think really, and it might seem a little bit strange to be still giving the praise to someone who hasn't been at the club since summertime last year, but would you say that there's still an influence and a legacy there from Alan Stubbs' time with regards to the personnel who seem to step up in these games and how they actually still approach these matches?
Definitely, yeah. It's something I was thinking about today. Actually, I saw Alan Stubbs was a summariser on BT when I was watching the highlights this morning, and well, you look at the key men last night: John McGinn, Dylan McGeoch, Marvin Bartley. They're all sort of Alan Stubbs signings. I mean, that's not to take anything away from Neil Lennon, because he's obviously maintained this superbly and added little bits and pieces of his own, like Barker and Murray, and even Efe Ambrose, who had a really good game last night, and Marciano was solid, dealt with everything he had to do. But certainly in terms of getting the run going, Alan Stubbs and his team were the ones that sort of stopped the rot against Hearts, if you like. They had that really strong performance at Easter Road when Ozturk scored the equaliser, when Hearts were flying at the top of the league. But Hibs played really well that day and arguably should have won. They were also unlucky in the very first derby under Stubbs when Sam Nicholson and Bobbins scored, and Hibs, Liam Craig scores a penalty. May have been a totally different game, but certainly every game since Hibs and Hearts got relegated, Hibs have held their own in every derby. Even at Tynecastle, I remember the game where Jamie Walker scored, Jason Cummings gave Hibs the lead.
That's right, yeah.
Hibs held their own, were certainly well worth their point. Then the Scottish Cup games, okay, Hearts went 2-0 up in the game where Hibs went on to win the Cup, but there's an argument that Hibs were probably the better team in the first half, even though they were 2-0 down. Equally, Hearts get slaughtered for the way the second half unfolded, but as Craig Levine touched on earlier in the week, Hearts had a lot of injuries.
I think the Ozturk injury that day probably undone us more than anything else. I think June picked up a knock
Bobbin
as well.
went off after 10 minutes or something. Don Cowie had to come in for his debut, I think.
That's right.
So there was a lot of factors that worked against Hearts that day, and Alan Stubbs has spoke several times about how he told the players, we are the better team here, keep believing. Obviously that's a massive turning point in the recent sort of dynamic of the derby, the way Hibs came back. Hibs played superbly in that second half. As much as Hearts lost their way, it was a lot of that was to do with Hibs, and I'm sure Bartley, Kevin Thompson, just Hibs had them pegged back.
That's right. I think McGeoch actually got injured after about half an hour that day.
Yeah,
sure
he
Thompson
did have to
had to come on for him. Yeah,
Kevin Thompson had probably his best game in that stint at Hibs. He came on. Hibs just sort of dictated the second half, but again, if Paul Hanlon doesn't knock that equaliser in, then Hearts, you don't know how that would have panned out. So a lot of it's just down to quirks and little things that unfold. These little things can just turn on, fine margins and what have you. But no, certainly they've built up a momentum in the fixture, and again last year they went into the first game in the Scottish Cup as underdogs because Hearts had just destroyed Rangers and Motherwell, and I think everybody was thinking Castro's team are just going to blow Hibs away here. Hibs came at Tynecastle this under Neil Lennon, and just played really doggedly and physically, and were just really resilient.
I think the game management for Lennon shone compared to Castro that day. I think Hearts, because I remember obviously the pitch was being rightly lambasted for being pretty much almost like a sandpit, and what I felt Hibs done well that day was the They played Keaton's, I think, at the tip of a diamond. They had Holt playing up front, and they just decided to go direct. They had no intention to try to play football because it was impossible to do so. Whereas Hearts, I think, naively were still trying to play from the back. I think we even gave away a corner kick from our own kick-off within the first minute of the game. That just seemed to set the tone for that match, and we were almost lucky to get the replay and go into that second game, which of course, panned out the way that it did. Obviously sticking on Neil Lennon then, because it is true that he should be getting rightly praised as well with regards to the key elements that he's added, and naturally some of those players had a huge impact last night, most notably Murray and Barker. He came out last night and mentioned that he felt that Hearts could quite rightly probably feel as if they were let off there with regards to it just being 1-0. Now, I've seen two sides to this argument. There's been people that have been pointing out that Hibs only had maybe 2 or 3 shots on target, and maybe it was a little bit of an overreaction to state that Hearts were maybe slightly flattered by the scoreline. What would be your interpretation of that post-match comment?
I can see why Neil's saying it. I can see why people are saying that Hibs were miles ahead of Hearts. They were undoubtedly deserved winners. If they'd won 2 or 3-0, then you probably wouldn't have said it was an unfair reflection. But equally, there was times in that second half where, although Hearts weren't necessarily playing well, I thought if anybody's going to score next, it's going to be Hearts. And that was maybe only for 10-15 minutes in the second half, but I didn't ever feel it was like the last derby where it was gone after half an hour, and you just felt there was no way back for Hearts in that one in February. And even though Hearts weren't playing well last night and weren't particularly threatening, I still felt they had a wee bit of a push in the second half. And having seen these games over the last 10-15 years, often Hibs take the lead at Easter Road, Hearts come on strong in the second half and get an equaliser without playing particularly well. I remember a game where Paul Hartley scored a free kick. Obviously the argument is that Hearts maybe had better quality midfielders back then and were able to do that and able to conjure points out of not playing very well, whereas last night you're probably thinking the only real threat here is Lafferty or Walker. I mean, Lafferty ran his socks off last night, almost had that chance where he went for the Louis Moult style lob in the first half, but apart from that he never really had a sniff. But certainly in terms of Hibs being dominant, I wouldn't go as far as to say they dominated. Certainly in terms of possession they didn't dominate, because it was something like 56-44, which to me doesn't imply wholesale dominance. But on the face of it, you would look at it and say, if you were picking the 11 best players on the pitch, probably 9 or 10 would have been Hibs players. I think Christophe Berra played well for Hearts. Beyond that, most of them had off nights. Not that they weren't trying, but they were just overpowered, outplayed, maybe set up in the wrong way. It's very difficult because you're slaughtering players, but then you've also got to factor in that they had no midfield supporting them. Lafferty had no midfield providing for him. The defence had no midfield really offering steely protection, so it's very hard to say Suter and Berra, you had shockers. They didn't really, in the context of we had no midfield protection, they defended pretty well. In the context of Lafferty had no support, he played alright. In the context of Walker, didn't really have anybody on the same wavelength as him. He worked, he tried to make things happen, it didn't come off for him. Hibs were working together as a unit, that was the key difference. They sort of overpowered Hearts collectively. Defensively they were sound when they had to be, but they were never under that much pressure whereas Berra and Suter were sort of all hands to the pump at times. Not that there was relentless Hibs pressure all the way, but you felt that Berra and Suter just had to clear their lines whenever the ball went up the pitch, whereas Ambrose and Hanlon, there maybe wasn't as much pressure on them when the ball went up there. They had a wee bit of time to play from the back, so they naturally look more comfortable because of the way the game panned out. But in terms of dominant, I mean, if Hibs had won 4 or 5-0, I think that would have been an unfair reflection. If Hibs had won 2 or 3-0, you could maybe say, yeah, probably worth it. But equally, if Cole Stockton scores that volley at the end, everybody leaves the ground and says, Hearts, we were ugly, we were professional, we nicked a point when we're not at our best. Hibs fans go away saying, we were impotent, we didn't take our chances, we got what we deserved. Goals change games, that's the fundamental. I mean, there's no getting away from Hibs were the better team, they deserved to win the match. But had that game ended 1-1 last night, I wouldn't have been massively surprised. Had it ended 2-0 or 3-0 to Hibs, I wouldn't have been massively surprised. I know that's covering all bases, but it was one of those when it's 1-0 anything can happen, and I felt until midway through that second half, I felt Hearts were in the game without playing particularly well, and it was only sort of the last 10 minutes Hibs really, when John McGinn had that breakaway chance and McLaughlin tipped it behind, Hibs just sort of saw it the last 10 minutes really professionally, and Hearts just looked like they weren't going to get back in the game from then on.
Might seem a little bit like nitpicking, given how dominant Hibs were for the majority of the match, but would you say that there were still signs there in Hibs' play that they could still possibly, albeit for their dominant possession and pressure on teams, could maybe still struggle to see teams off in games? I felt that there was at times on over elaborate play from certain players, or maybe when the chance came to shoot, they were sometimes maybe wanting to take an extra touch. Most notably, I think there was an example of that in the second half with Martin Boyle, where he looked like he could have taken it on his right foot, tried to take it then onto his left and cut in. Do you still think that there's a sign there that Hibs could potentially still drop points in games where they probably shouldn't be? Kind of similar to what they've done already away to teams like Dundee and St Johnstone
at home Motherwell as well, 2-0 up. Yeah, no, definitely. I said to the guy sitting next to me, I says, Hibs don't look like closing this out effectively. It was like after an hour you could sense the Hibs fans were getting a little bit anxious. I mean, people forget that now because they've won the game and there's all the euphoria, but there was a period in the second half where the Hearts fans were right up for it. They could sense an equaliser, they were starting to get behind the team, and the Hibs fans were getting a wee bit sort of antsy, if you like, having to get behind their team and sort of will them on a wee bit. I mean, there was a time where I thought, I can see why Hibs have thrown away leads or why they've not been able to see games out, because for all that they were playing well, they did start to get a wee bit sort of, not panicked. I would never say they were panicked. They always seemed fairly in control, but I thought to myself, if there was a more potent team than Hearts up against them, for instance an on-form Motherwell with Louis Moult up front, then I could have seen them potentially hemming Hibs back and getting an equaliser. So you can I mean, Hearts are, if you get, it's hard. Last night watching Hearts, some people instinctively say, oh, it was a Cathro team again. It was, I mean, bear in mind that there was only one player started from that game in February. It's a totally different team. Yes, the performance was pretty limp in an attacking sense and they never looked like getting anything out of the game, but they were, in general, this is a more robust Hearts team, a more sort of resilient Hearts team than the one from last season. If they'd had a little bit more about them in midfield and attack, I think they possibly could have got something out of that game last night, even without playing well. But equally, Hibs had enough chances, and that would be the one thing that might undo them, the fact that they're not taking these chances when they're on top.
I think one of the things that were highlighted to me last night when I was talking about the game sort of coming out the ground was where I felt that Hibs have went right with their recruitment, especially over the last sort of 2 or 3 seasons, is they seem to have almost been able to spread their finances well and across the pitch, and also be able to come up with a bit of strength and depth. Now, I can only go on the sort of figures and information that you sort of hear through the grapevine, but it does seem as if Hibs are maybe potentially spending a little bit more on their squad than Hearts are currently, whereas Hearts, from the outside looking in, seem to have almost implemented a recruitment strategy just now, which seems to be based on bringing 2 or 3 sort of almost big coups, so Berra and Lafferty, and then maybe try and get a strong 11, hope that you're going to stay injury free out of those 11, and then be able to implement the younger players like Henderson and Cochrane, Curry and Brandon throughout the season. That naturally looks as if it's maybe not working just now due to the fact that we've had so many injuries in the centre of the park. How does that translate to you just now in terms of the recruitment drive over the last couple of years? Can you see similarities there with regards to Hearts and what they're trying to do, and maybe what they're trying to implement in terms of having that strong first 11 and then trying to sort of bear fruit from some of the work that they're doing behind the scenes with the youth development? Oh
yeah, I mean, look at the contrast of the two teams. There's no getting away from the fact that Hibs, since relegation, Hibs recruitment has been by and large excellent. They have had failures. They've had your Islam Farouz, your Jake Sinclairs, but not high profile failures, and generally these guys have been moved on pretty quickly when they've not worked out. But you look at the guys they've brought in, they've consistently brought in players of reasonable repute who have lived up to, they got the best out of Fraser Fivey, the best out of Dylan McGeer, the best out of Scott Allen, the best out of John McGinn, best out of Darren McGregor, got Effie Ambrose playing again. They've even got the boy Barker, looked this sort of slow burner, but he's coming to the boil now. I mean, he looks, even Marciano, I know he had a bit of a ropey time, but generally he's been a good goalkeeper for them. They're getting, most of their big signings have worked for them, And I think what they do is they sign players ready to go in the first team straight away that aren't going to need necessarily the same bedding in period that guys Hearts are signing. Hearts have got a sort of risky strategy because they're signing foreign players and they're signing guys like Milinkovic, for instance, who even Craig Levein doesn't know for certain when he signs him that he's going to be a success. He's taken a punt that we could either get a superstar here or we could get an absolute dud. He's probably never seen him play. I don't think Craig would hide that fact. He's watched videos of him. He's thinking we could potentially get a better player here than we could get by shopping in Scotland or getting a guy who's already played in the Premiership, and he could go on and be, I know he's only on loan, but he could be a guy that makes a real difference. Craig knows when he signs these guys, he's spoken about it before, he says every player we sign, generally speaking, these foreign guys, they're all a risk because we don't know how they're going to adapt. And I think he's obviously hoping that everybody's going to be an Osman Sow or an early Arnaud Djoum sort of thing, but for every one of these guys there's also an Oshaniwa who looks good on paper and just can't adapt to Scottish football. So I think even Grilak, I think he's one of these guys, he's got a really decent pedigree when you look at where he's played in Poland, but as soon as you see Hearts signing Grilak, you think straight away that's a massive gamble. Just the way the guy, he's sort
thinking
of
an athletic sort of sense. He almost looks, and I think this is where we've potentially come undone with similar signings like, you know, Mallory Martin on paper looked like a great signing, and even when you see him in fits and bursts you can see the quality that he has, but it's translating that to that style of football in this country, and I think that's where we potentially are having a bit of a risky strategy with bringing in some of these players.
Well, I think that's where Hibs have gone right. They've signed guys who know British football, who know Scottish football, who know they've even brought Stokes and Whittaker back to Easter Road, the guys who know Hibs. I know Hearts have done that to an extent with Berra and Lafferty and Michael Smith as well, but they've also, a large proportion of their guys have come in from abroad, and it's, to be honest, apart from So and Djoum, none of them have been roaring successes, have they really? It's the other issue with Hearts bringing in these foreign guys as well is possibly because fans are turning on them quickly. They're not giving them a chance to find their feet. After 6 bad months they're shipped out, which to me, if you really trust the signing, give him a chance to find his feet. I mean, someone like Connor Salmon's a slightly different example because he's played in British football before, but I genuinely think, having had that first very difficult year at Hearts, if they had persisted with him this year, I think they might have got something out of him this year. The danger with Salmon is he's just that sort of guy that attracts boo boys no matter what. Even if he has a good game, he still gets mocked. So you're in a sort of vicious circle there.
I think that's a lot of that could be down to sometimes fans looking at him and making an assumption that he's a target man, and I feel like we're doing something similar just now with Kyle Lafferty, and it's something we've been guilty of doing in the past with other players like John Sutton, and potentially even when you look at Cole Stockton just now, you look at the general makeup of the player and you look at the size and the stature and you think, so he's going to play with his back to goal and he's going to be fine being quite isolated in a 4-5-1, when in fact a lot of these players that we've signed, similar to Salmon runs the channels, but he's not really, I mean, you could probably fit a beer mat under his feet when he's jumping, and he'd probably be the first one to admit that that's probably not the strongest part to his game. There does seem to be just now not just a problem with the recruitment, but also how we're sometimes then implementing those players and trying to bed them in. You know, Oshinawa, there seemed to be an acceptance from the coaching staff, and they seem to almost embrace the fact that the Hearts fans were generally heralding this as a major coup, rather than say, well look, you know, this guy hasn't played in this country before, maybe give him 2-3 months and just see how it goes. They seem to almost embrace the fact that the Hearts fans were expecting him to hit the ground running. How's that sort of looked upon with regards to the press recently?
To be honest, I look at things in a more long-term view than a lot of people do. A lot of people just want to write people up. I mean, I would genuinely, I know it's not a popular view, but I wouldn't write Grilak off yet, for instance. I would give him a year at Hearts to find his feet, then see how he goes next season. I know a lot of people say, you can see now he's not up to it and what have you, but I genuinely don't think you can write a guy off after 6 months or 3 months. I think every one of these guys, unless they're absolute huddies and beyond, but this guy has a track record of playing in the top league in Poland, so he's not a huddy. He's managed to sustain a career in football, so he's obviously capable of something. I just think Robbie Nielsen spoke about it. He says generally these foreign guys need a year to acclimatise to Scottish football, but then you were seeing guys like Juanma, who you can see has got quality, but he's getting shipped out after a year. Why not use that year to your advantage? He's had that bedding in period. Give him the next 6 months and see, is he going to live up to it now that he's had that year in Scotland? If he doesn't, then punt him out. But it seems like they're investing in these guys, making a judgment of them, probably based on supporter perception as well, because boos from the Tynecastle crowd can kill players. I mean, that people say, they shouldn't be influenced by what the crowd are saying, but they're human beings like you or I. They're going to get affected if folk are jeering their every touch. I mean, from speaking to these guys, maybe it's easy for me to say because I know them on a personal level and I know sort of how they feel, and you can see that they are fragile guys just like the rest of us. But certainly in terms of foreign guys coming into the country, I think if you are going to sign foreign guys, give them a chance to bed in. It's like Mallory Martin. He's got a decent track record, decent CV. He had a few moments before the Hibs game where he looked pretty handy without being exceptional. He knows he didn't live up to whatever hype there was when he first came in. He knows he's not done enough. He's been trying to adapt. He's an intelligent guy. He knows, he can see with his own eyes what's required to succeed in Scottish football. So I would say give him another chance. Put him in there, give him 3 or 4 games, and if he doesn't succeed this time, then you say, okay, we've backed a dead horse or whatever, and you try and get him out the door. But there's no point in consistently signing these foreign players, writing them off after 10 games and then putting them out the door again.
Well, historically there's been examples of it working in our favour to give people that chance. I mean, Thomas Flogo was one of the best examples of that. Yeah. He came in, I remember him getting brought off at half time in his debut at Ibrox because he was just looked like a fish out of water. He was playing on the right wing, and he just didn't look like he could adapt. And even after that, he came off the bench a few times, and it wasn't really until about sort of November, December time where he really started having a huge impact on that Hearts team. So there is cases to say there that the Hearts fans should be maybe.
Lucas is another one. He was nearly run out of town in his first
when he was brought in
years, and then he becomes one of the biggest legends in club history. I mean, a foreign player going into it's the same if a Scottish player goes abroad. They're not going to go over there and hit the ground running. It's totally unrealistic to expect that. I mean, you take the best players, if you put Scott Brown in the Bundesliga or Serie A, he's not going to hit the ground running and start dictating games over there the way he does for Celtic. He's going to need a year to establish what's the style of football here. It's going to be a totally different environment, totally different. I mean, people say football's football. It's not. There's loads of different ways of playing, different expectations of what the right way. I mean, I remember speaking to Faisal Reras, and folk will say, he's another one, but he was genuinely sort of taken aback at how much sort of physical side of the game involved over here. I mean, some of these guys come in here and football's just literally getting the ball and passing it and getting your interceptions in, whereas here you're expected to go in for put your body on the line basically, and it is a bit of a culture shock for these guys. And I've got a lot of sympathy even for the guys that are seen as the sort of gutless guys that were at Hearts last season. I mean, Tassos Avlonitis has played in the Greek league. He's not pea-hearted. He's not a Huddy. Obviously this was just the wrong environment for him at the wrong time, as it was for pretty much all of these guys last year. They're not pea-hearted guys though, or they wouldn't be able to sustain a career at the level they have over that period of time. But certainly the Edinburgh Derby probably requires local knowledge, British sort of up and at 'em style, put your body on the line. And I'm not saying the Hearts players didn't do that last night, because I think most of them tried as hard as they could, but ultimately guys who are better at it, the likes of McGinn and Bartley and even McGeoch and Paul Hanlon, who's played that fixture I don't know how many times, these guys came to the fore last night.
I know we've obviously moved quite a bit away from the game itself last night, and I think it's probably a valid thing to do because there wasn't really a lot of flashpoints in the game. You know, it was generally just a case of, you know, who was going to win the midfield battle was going to win the match ultimately, and naturally that was probably going to be Hibs as long as they were on their A game. But I felt that it did open up a wider debate with regards to talking about the trajectory of both clubs. It's been widely now debated amongst both sets of fans over the last couple of years. Naturally, Hibs have won a cup, they've now been promoted as well, and they're now in a situation where they can say that they're above Hearts in the league. Would you say that it's still too early to say that there's been a sort of power shift between the clubs? Would you say that that's something that needs to be maybe analysed again towards the end of this season? Or would you say that now is the right time after last night to now say, well look, Hibs are now the dominant team in this city?
they're the dominant team in terms of the derby over the last 3 years, but I would stop short of saying they're the dominant team in the city. I would say we'll assess how things look at the end of the season. If Hibs are clearly above Hearts at the end of the league at the end of the season and they're still ruling the roost in the derbies, then you've got to say they are the top team in the city. I mean, certainly on paper they look the strongest team at the moment, but I couldn't say for certainty that they will finish ahead of Hearts over the course of a league season. They might win the next 3 derbies. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but equally I wouldn't be surprised if over the course of the season Hearts were able to pick up more points, simply because I think, despite last night, I think Hearts still have a resilience about them, and when they get boys back, and they will make 1 or 2 signings in January, and they will be in slightly better shape. I'm pretty certain Craig's going to sort things out as he goes. Craig's still learning. It sounds ridiculous, but Craig's still getting to grips with this management side again. He's been out of it for a wee while. He's still he's still trying to work out probably what the strengths are of all these guys, their best positions. I mean, the fact he's playing a 16-year-old in midfield.
Plus there's the added remit of making sure that guys like McPhee and Daly and that are still getting as much exposure to coaching at that level as they can as well. So he is still trying to juggle both jobs at the same time. Yeah,
definitely. And the fact they've not played a game at Tynecastle as well. I mean, it's easy to say when they get back to Tynecastle they'll start motoring. I'm not convinced that'll happen. I think they will have a few setbacks at Tynecastle because I don't think they're ready to fly yet. But equally, it's not beyond possibility they could win probably 4 of the next 6 at Tynecastle, because they are against teams that you would expect to be in or around the bottom 6, if you like. So I mean, if they started to get a bit of momentum towards Christmas, whilst other teams are maybe winning a game and drawing a game, winning a game, losing a game sort of thing, then there's no reason they can't be up there in sort of certainly top 6 by Christmas time. And if they're in the top 6, then they add a couple of the right players in January. The right players, probably at this stage you would say a left back and a dominant central midfielder. And by dominant I mean powerful, physical, and able to play a little bit. I don't know how you find that guy on Hearts' budget, but I'm sure there is somebody out there. If they look, I would be inclined to look British, even if it means like looking down to the low end of the English Championship for a guy who's maybe lost their way in the last 6 months or whatever. Somebody with a bit of physicality and a bit of a proven track record of succeeding in British football. Just, it's easy to look at Marvin Bartley and say they need a Marvin Bartley. I don't know how easy it is to find a Bartley, because you could go down south and pick up a holding midfielder and find that he's just pretty hopeless. I mean, Hibs have got a good structure which probably allows Bartley to look. If Bartley was playing in another team, he might not look as strong. So I mean, Hearts have got so many little bits and pieces they need to get right to allow the likes of Walker and Doom and Lafferty and Gonçalves to play at their peak. They need to get the midfield sorted. They need to get a proper left back who's reliable enough to play every week so that Smith can stay on the right. And then they need to sort of, once they get that core sorted, and I think Callaghan has a role to play in there. I think he, going forward, can be, he's got energy, he'll get about, he's got a wee bit of quality. He's probably not the sort of quality that Hearts really want at this stage, but certainly if he's alongside somebody of reasonable presence, I think he can do a job in there. Walker in front of him, Doom another option, assuming he's back to his best when he comes back or gets close to his best. They're not too far away in terms of personnel. If they can get, as I say, a left back and a midfielder, I think would go a long way to solving a lot of Hearts' problems, and playing back at Tynecastle should in theory help them. And if all that happens and they do start to pick up results, then you can't say for certain that Hearts won't finish ahead of Hibs. I know that there'll be Hibs fans shouting at their radios listening to this, saying how can you say that, but right now, for all that Hibs are playing well in big games, they're not winning a lot of games. They've only won 3 of their last 10 games. One of those was against Livingston in the League Cup. There's no disputing Hibs are an easier on the eye team. They've got a better sort of structure to them, got better pedigree at the moment, but they're not winning football matches consistently. Now the hope for every Hibs fan is that game last night acts as a catalyst and they go on a run. Guys like Barker start to do it consistently. Guys like Boyle start. I mean, Boyle's a frustrating player. He's quick, he gets into good positions, but he seems to lack that cutting edge when he gets in there. If you can get all these guys playing consistent, I think that's the area they need to sort their attack. They need to get Stokes scoring the way he was maybe a month ago, scoring regularly. They need to get somebody playing up beside him, supporting him, whether that's Murray or a wide player playing off him or a number 10 playing off him or whatever. because they need to start killing games off. Otherwise, all this good play is going to count for little if they end up finishing 6th or 7th in the league, which I think on paper they're potentially 3rd place. And if they played like last night, or like how they play in most of their big games, they could challenge Aberdeen. The problem is they don't always play to that level.
It seems to be a case that, again, just looking at this for sort of the Hearts end, when I watch Hibs, they just seem to lack that little spark in that centre of the park in terms of in that final third. So they've got plenty of it within the middle of the park, through McGinn, through McGeoch sort of being the playmaker, the deep line playmaker. I don't know whether this is something that over time Slivka will add to them.
No, I was thinking
they seem
Swanson.
to be struggling. Yeah, well, I suppose Swanson
he would be
as
the
well.
obvious one.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going back to the diamond. I think if you could get Swanson playing to St Johnstone form, I know he played on the left wing at St Johnstone, but for me, he would be a perfect number 10 if you could get him in there behind Stokes and Murray at the point of a diamond with McGeoch, Bartley and McGinn behind them. I mean, Neil Lennon likes width though, so I can't see that happening, but certainly Swanson could play somewhere in midfield, I would imagine, and bring a bit of creativity. Or you could put Slivka in there and free up McGeoch to play higher up the pitch, which obviously he's tried in the last few games with McGeoch playing just off the striker, because he's probably the most sort of cultured, creative one out of those boys. Barker's going to bring spark. If he can play like that, then he's going to give them an edge. He looked real quality last night. You could see you could see why Neil Lennon was so keen to get him in. He looked like he had real quality when he got the ball. Played with an incisiveness. But again, it's fun with Hibs. It's just about getting that consistency and being able to do it against, for instance, they go to Motherwell on Saturday. Yeah. They go to Motherwell on Saturday. Hard game, but Motherwell are not a Rangers, a Celtic or an Aberdeen in terms of the status that goes with the game. So can Hibs raise their game to go through there and beat a really good Motherwell team? You would like to think after last night they'll have a bit of a bounce about them, but certainly after the last couple of derbies, they've won the derbies in really good fashion. They've sort of lost their way after that. They had that nosedive under Alan Stubbs 2 years ago where they went 5 or 6 games without a win.
I think there was a home game against Morton seemed to trigger it.
Yeah.
With regards
and
to
then
that
last season I think they made heavy weather of it for maybe a few weeks before they eventually got over the line in terms of winning the league. So the hope for Hibs would be that this game kicks them into life and they start going on a winning run, because prior to last night they'd won 2-9, and for the way they're playing and the players they've got, that's not really good enough.
Well, thanks very much for coming in tonight, Anthony. It's been really good to sort of discuss the fact that maybe things aren't quite as bad as they seem at the Hearts end, maybe not quite as positive as they seem to be at the Hibs end as well. That just leaves me to say thanks very much for everyone that's been listening over the last hour. Stay tuned for 6 o'clock. Steve Miller will be with us on Radio Saltire, and I hope everyone has a pleasant evening. Take care.